Hi, my name's Simon Timpley from the International Food Safety and Quality Network. Welcome to edition 91 of the Food Safety Fridays webinar program. Today we have Kim Onnett from NSF International, and we're going to be talking about culture and specifically also how to meet audit requirements and demands for food safety culture requirements. Just to say, today's webinar and the Food Safety Fridays webinar program is sponsored by our kind friends over at Metal at Toledo, AIB International, Safe Food 360, DNVGL, and Trace Analytics. You'll see their logos on the certificate that you'll receive for attending today. We'll also send out afterwards a email to all registrants with a recording, the slides, the certificate, and I think also a link to some document that Kim will be telling you about later. So welcome. It's great to have you here. I'm going to load in the sidebar shortly an attendee checklist. So if you have any problems, you can refer to that and rather than just typing in the sidebar, try some of those things on there. But for now, I'd like to welcome Kim. Are you there, Kim?
Here.
Yes. How are you doing, Kim? Nice to have you with us again.
Yes. It's great to be here.
Yeah, and you're dialing in from
Guelph, Ontario.
Yeah, and it's cold.
And it is cold and gray and rainy, and
yeah, but
we've had enough, and it's only February 23rd.
But you're treating yourself to a little holiday, aren't you?
Yes.
Right.
It'll be nice.
Good. Right. Okay. Well, if you want to get your slides ready, Kim, I'll tell the audience about the next webinar, which is it's actually not next week. I think it's the week after. It is. I've loaded it in the sidebar. It's passing your compressed air analysis, tips and troubleshooting for successful compliance. Obviously, compressed air has got to be fit for purpose, no microbes, no contamination, oil, etc. So we've got Matthew DeVay, from Quality Assurance Director from Trace Analytics, and he will be here on the 16th of March. Right. I'll be back for some polls. I'll be joining with that, the Q&A later. But for now, can you get your slides up, Kim, on the share? Yeah,
there we go.
Good to go. So I'll leave it to you now, Kim, and I'll be back later.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Simon. It's great to be with everyone today, either this morning or afternoon, depending on where you're located, to talk about food safety culture, how we can show that in an audit, or where the auditor kind of interacts with your culture, and maybe give some ideas of where you can start to have this conversation in your facility. It's not going away. This is the next wave of improvements, or the next wave of evolution in food safety management systems. As Simon said, I am with NSF International. I am the technical manager for training and education in the US. And I wanted to share some news about our new website, nsflearn.com. And that is a view of the landing page after you choose your country. And all of our courses are available there. In particular, we have some new webinars and e-learning opportunities that everyone may be interested. So feel free to visit that website when we're done. So if you're not familiar with NSF, or if you are, this will be a bit of a repeat, but our mission has always been to focus on improving human health and affecting human lives throughout all of our offerings. So here's where we operate in writing standards to promote food, drinking water, indoor air, dietary supplements, consumer products, environmental safety. There are certifications not only through auditing, but certification through those standards. Some of you may interact with us from an auditing perspective for your GFSI benchmarked audit and have a certificate audit through us. We operate in the sustainability space and also contribute to certifying to ISO standards in automotive and manufacturing. And then I am in the training group, which operates in the Global Food Division. And we develop training and education programs throughout all of those sectors that you see there on the slide. The Global Food Division vision is to be the #1 provider, the most trusted brand, to work with you on your food safety and quality journey. Our drive is always integrity. We have a global presence and operate as a global team. So here's an outline of what we will look at today. We'll talk first about what is culture, what is the current positioning, what have been some of the influences historically, how we've looked at culture, how that works with your organization and your food safety management system goals, what the current view is on expectations and how that will fit in the organization. And then how does this work for audit preparation? Can we use the status of our culture or where we want to grow to in our culture? Can we use that to prepare for audits, to strengthen our improvement areas? And employee interviews, I'll talk a bit about how that's assessed, how those interviews go, how that feeds into audit and auditor's perception of culture. We'll talk about interviewing senior management. And then again, assessing your culture. You can't show it if you don't know it. So we'll try to summarize things up at the end around maybe some next steps and improvements possibly that you can choose to take on. So I chose this quote, "We are what we repeatedly do," because I think it's the most base definition of what culture is or how we experience culture day to day at work. And it may feel like a very uphill battle, and my likeness to Sisyphus in this picture to the Greek mythology. It makes sense. We sometimes feel in plants that we are repeating the same thing and not getting the result we want, or not fully aware of how our culture is affecting that. So when we look at food safety culture, it's really organizational culture. What are the values? What are the attitudes of our organization that influence behavior in the workforce? Behaviors relate to decisions, relate to food safety decisions that employees may be making during the shift. So organizational culture, and there are many different definitions. I pulled this from the Business Dictionary. The values and behaviors that contribute to the unique social and psychological environment of an organization. So there's the overall organizational culture. And then food safety culture, a set of shared attitudes, values, and beliefs around food safety. And of those definitions that are out there, I like this one the most. This actually was taken from Frank Yiannis's book, Food Safety, his first book on food safety culture, which is a great read if you're looking to get started. What is the philosophy behind food safety culture? And in that book, he talks about, don't create a food safety plan, create a food safety culture, and the plan and HACCP and all these pieces will fall into place when the culture commitment and the commitment to creating a food safety culture is there. So I have a poll question here. If you have a good training program, you have a strong food safety culture. Yes, no, maybe. What does everyone think about that?
Okay, yeah, I've loaded the poll in the sidebar. The question, just to reiterate, if you have a good training program, you have a strong food safety culture. The possible answer is yes, no, or maybe. And I can tell you that the poll at the moment, we've got just over 50% maybe, and then it's sort of shared between yes and no, 22, 23%. Yeah, that's roughly what it's settling down, just over 50% maybe, and then slightly more yes than no.
Well, that makes sense. This makes sense. I like the leaning towards the maybe, because that is really an indicator of everyone's understanding of food safety culture and where you're at with that. Maybe you do have a strong food safety culture if you have a good training program, but a strong training program is going to go beyond, and having a strong food safety culture is going to have to extend beyond your training program.
Okay, yep.
So thank you, everyone, for weighing in on that. So what are the implications of culture in the workplace? To talk about organizational culture, it's impossible not to quote Edgar Schein, because he is probably the premier person within the US that's and internationally that's done the work around organizational culture, and is part of the quality gurus. If you've done any certified manager of quality training or CQA training, he is prominent in the discussion around organizational cultures. And I like this quote in particular because of the last line, and if necessary, the destruction of culture. So when certification audits first came to North America, there was a very clear line between folks that grabbed onto that new concept, the new culture of a management system, and those that did not. And there was some struggle. So yes, we want management and senior management to encourage culture and a positive culture, but there may be some times where you're going to need to break down some of the old beliefs and wipe out some of that previous culture that was not as productive. So in order to show our culture, we need to get to know it, or to know where to start to improve. So we want to move from a reactive place to a more proactive place. So when we're reactive, it somewhat looks like maybe all of the food safety risks may not have been identified in the HACCP plan. Maybe there's a low-level engagement with the workforce. Maybe the HACCP plan is something that sits on a shelf, and employees just know they need to take this one test and write it down, and there's not that organic interaction with the HACCP plan. Maybe there have been, as a result of that, there have been some recalls that puts your brand at risk. Maybe your customer complaints or client complaints are increasing. Potentially there's a loss of some business or regulatory action. So when we're in that reactive place, we want to move to the proactive place, which is being broad in our identification of hazards or risks that we're managing in the food safety plan, always being on that front edge of what's coming for our industry, making sure we're reassessing our HACCP plan to address those emerging issues. There's a high engagement level with employees with the food safety plan and with each other. They're making strong decisions around food safety. This can lead to an increased reputation for your company or recognition, increased customers because of the reputation for your business around food safety and quality at the price point that has been promised. And the other opportunity in a proactive system is that food safety issues are found in-house. When you have a strong food safety management system, strong culture, that safety net is created within. So NSF has a maturity model that we use to assess not only the business, because it will address the organization and the business, but also addresses food safety culture. And we're going to look at just a couple tools that are in that program. And one is the generations of sophistication. So what you see on the slide are iterations of maturity around culture. So the first generation, we're looking at things like no formal policies. There's no real budget for food safety, a very cost-driven culture. Most likely haven't had some type of a third-party audit. You're at a base, meeting regulatory requirements, but not taking that next leap. And then at generation level 2, you have policies, you have written procedures, but there's not that ownership at all levels. Senior leadership is not as involved. You may have some audits, maybe a second party audit, maybe some internal auditing that you're doing. You've committed to some level of budget in food safety, but food safety is seen as a cost center. I think in this level, I always think about, since I was an auditor 12 years previous to being in this position, I think about those sites that when you talk about the audit, they say, oh, that's QA. Yeah, QA handles the audit. We don't get too much involved with the audit. So there are systems and standards there, but some are seen as some see it as impractical. And maybe by design, because of the culture, some of those procedures and systems are impractical. And then at 3, there's a big jump between 2 and 3. And 3 and 4 really require that senior management commitment. So there's more commitment there, stronger policies in place, they're reviewed and improved. The communication is there. There's a positive attitude and support for the food safety management systems, more in-depth audits, and you're managing data and trend results as an input to management review to improve. And then the final top level of generation and sophistication would be full-on senior management or senior leadership commitment. They're leading the policies. So it's not QA's job or the food safety team's job to fully enact policy or determine policy. They're working in conjunction with management. The communication and commitment is of the top level. Internal and external auditing formats are in line with the culture and enforcing or in enhancing and supporting the culture. Regular reviews and benchmarking against other best-in-class programs. And although we don't all compete on food safety, because of the efficiencies gained, there's an opportunity for the competitive advantage there. This is a different presentation of the same material, but with a little bit different approach. In that generation 1 is where you're sitting in a situation of control. You must do this, but there's no why behind it for the employees. They are executing on doing what they need to do so they don't lose their job. And then as we get to level 2, it's more compliance. It's a practice. And then that jump from level 2 to 3 really involves those behavior enablers like a more developed training program, senior management commitment, driving that improvement from the top. And then food safety behaviors are second nature. Then knowledge is embedded. There's full-on commitment. And then at level 4, a full-on cooperation where everyone's moving in the same direction and leadership is driving policies together. So after looking at those descriptions, what do you feel is the approach to food safety at your facility? Reactive, proactive, possibly it's some of both, depending on what stressors might be on the facility.
Okay, yeah, Kim, I've loaded the poll. So what's your approach to food? Well, what is the approach to food safety at your facility? Reactive or proactive? And I'm pleased to report that the balance is proactive,
All right.
just about 53%,
Excellent.
52%, well, 51. Yeah, just about. If we stop it now, it's just about proactive. Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. And I would imagine that lots of folks that are on the call are GFSI, are certified to a GFSI recognized scheme, or what they now call, with addition or the latest update from the guidance document, a certification program owner. And that's a good thing. And that's exactly what the drive was for that, for certification. Let's raise the bar on food safety culture, and how we manage food safety management systems. So on this current slide, I have referenced some of the measurement tools to get you started in looking at either improving the food safety culture you have, or getting an idea of where you sit. Where can you go to get more information? There are other food safety culture maturity models besides ours, easily found in Google searches. If you are certified to BRC, they have a very nice, very in-depth culture excellence food safety module, and that can be added to your audit when you have your BRC audit. It can be a bolt-on module, and they are seeing some great pickup. If you are not certified to BRC, you can still use that model. You can still use that audit module if you would like it. So check them out. Check out BRC's website if you're not already involved with BRC. The GFSI scheme requirements in the coming years will include something around food safety culture, and actually in the draft version of BRC Edition 8, there are 4 clauses around food safety culture. And the GFSI Food Safety Culture Working Group just finished their work, and their job was to determine some type of benchmarking document. So food safety culture, assessing that and showing that it's on the rise, it's coming in our future, and something we're not going to be able to, I don't think we're going to be able to sidestep that. It's going to appear in food safety schemes and management systems in some form or another in the coming years. So why engage with some of the tools? What's the upside to really digging into this and improving your culture? Well, you want to know what your attitudes, values, and behaviors are in your site, because they affect your turnover, potentially your lack of engagement or efficiency, maybe contributing to increased costs, maybe challenging your levels of communication. And you want to find out what those unwritten rules are. What are the processes that folks are following that maybe aren't part of a procedure? They are an extension of what happens out on the production floor. You get trained one way, or you get trained on the job. But along with that training comes some of the, well, this is what it says, but we do it this way. And these are very common things that happen in a facility. So if we're looking at developing food safety culture, obviously leadership needs to be involved. You want to marry that with your system-based approach that you have to food safety already, and look at some tactics to improve behaviors. So provide the leadership, develop a systems-based approach, and then tactics to improve and work on integrating food safety metrics to determine how you are performing. Management really leans on maintaining systems and processes, and that is a key role for that second tier management in the facility, QA managers, production managers, or even production supervisors. What we need from leadership is that commitment to affect change and encouraging excellence. So food safety culture is strengthened from both the top down and the bottom up. one of the easiest ways to do this, one of the common ways to do this, is to act differently. Encourage people when they're doing things right, not what they're supposed to do, but if they're identifying areas where non-conformances are prevented or diverted, they're identifying them early and bringing that information forward. Encourage your food safety culture by rewarding that positive behavior. Possibly taking an approach, another way to create a food safety culture team that also works within the HACCP team or as a partner to the HACCP team, looking at where your critical behavior issues are, establish the current appropriate behavior, and then determine how you can intervene and develop initiatives and targeted training to improve those behaviors. And that may include knowledge-based training, could include hands-on training, but through the food safety team, looking at where are our critical spots for food safety, what are our current behaviors around those, and how can we improve those? When we're doing that, there are sometimes some challenges. So we may have some biases or some unwritten beliefs that can be barriers. So we sometimes have a workforce that thinks it can't happen to me, or everything's fine, nothing's happened yet, so we must be operating fine. Then there's the view of, I know we're doing this wrong, I know we're doing this differently than the procedure, but I have a good reason. And then attitudinal ambivalence, there are more important things that matter. So uncovering those pieces, where are the attitudes? Where do the attitudes sit? Is a great place to start. And monitoring your process. Working towards determining some measures, choosing some performance indicators, and looking at the key factors around those indicators, leading and lagging indicators. Always connecting with what's related to employee behavior. Measure what's most important. We hear the expression now, measure what you treasure. And make sure you're tracking against those goals frequent enough to intervene with correction or have a course correction. So why is it hard to show food safety culture in an audit? Sometimes the key measures in the facility are financially focused or operations focused. So without a food safety metric or goal, you're having to over demonstrate that food safety is important. And quite honestly, in industry, the tracking and trending of physical safety incidents has progressed much faster than tracking and trending food safety incidents from a near miss perspective. So if you're currently tracking near miss instances in physical safety, would it be beneficial to do that from a food safety perspective and trending that information to see where improvements could be made? In some, and this would be reflected, this next point, only motivation is to pass the audit. We usually see that in generation 1 and 2. But if there's a lot of stress on the factory with line extensions, new portions of a building, new products, then that stress can add, and your certification audit is due. Sometimes it's just let's just get through the audit, and then the culture piece is taking a back seat. When there's turnover, there's a lot of fatigue practices, but time is, resource time is being pulled away. One of the things that auditors are always interacting with and perceiving during audit is, what are the values? What are the values of the organization? So priorities may change depending on the circumstance, but values will not. And more often than not, sites ground themselves in their values. So where does the auditor interact with food safety culture? When they're looking at the implementation of written programs, when they are interviewing employees, when they're watching, when they're observing employees. Do they embrace the values of the organization? Can they talk about the mission or the quality policy? And how do they know that management is committed to food safety and having a proactive culture? So what are the warning signs that, and as you're internally auditing, your internal audit team is looking at these perspectives also. Incomplete communication of change. Things have changed on the line, changed the things in formulation in a product, and not everyone who needs to be aware is fully aware. Is the HACCP plan reassessment or the re-verification review, whether it's 6 months or annually, however often you do it, is it a really in-depth review, or is it more of a checking the box? So auditors would notice that when they challenge you around the design of your HACCP plan. And then what's the response to nonconformances? Is it quick disposition of the nonconformance, or is there in-depth root cause analysis? Again, speaking to your attitude and motivation to improve. Do you close out nonconformances in a timely manner, or are there long delays? Or verification of effectiveness of corrective action is delayed or not done at all? Are the training programs that are in place, are they competency-based and moving away from read this procedure, watch this training, and sign off that you understand? So again, moving further up the generational scale. And then incomplete management reviews. Are all inputs needed to be discussed at management review discussed? And is there a view on food safety culture in that? So these are some of the management systems, and I'll speak in depth about these, how the auditor may approach that and how you would want to approach that from an internal auditor perspective if you are assigned to these areas to internal audit or part of leading that team. So what speaks to food safety culture when you're speaking with senior management and when you're interviewing senior management? And this may be a help to prep for the audit also. Being able to talk about the outcomes from management review. Are food safety issues that come up addressed? Is there a priority put on most critical or most important food safety issues? And what's that feedback mechanism from the food safety management system? How can employees or team leaders, supervisors, how can they move their concerns up the chain of command, so to speak, and be able to get that information in front of senior management? And management should be able to describe how they walk the talk of food safety culture, how they interact with the employees, how they make it known that it's important to them that the team, the food, whether it's a food safety culture team or the food safety team or functioning as both, how they've been empowered to drive the program forward. Changes and updates, change communication and management of change is always a challenge to the food safety management system, making sure the right folks are given the right information. So how does senior management interact with that? How is budgeting planned for food safety training, for improvements to the facility? And are there targets for food safety and quality? And are those equally measured with the organizational financial goals? Is it just as important to meet food safety goals as it is to meet growth targets and some of those business requirements? And you'll see pieces of this start to be part of some of the private restaurant standards, restaurant chain standards, where they're starting to look at food safety culture and how that's measured and how attitudes and motivations and behaviors are viewed by the site, by their suppliers. And in internal audits, commitment to maintaining a competent internal audit team. Are employee interviews part of the internal audit process? And it's a key piece of preparing the workforce for a third-party audit, preparing employees so they understand what's required of them, and can talk about the mission, the vision, what they do, and what their job entails beyond just what they do to impart their part in food safety. How do they influence with attitudes and behaviors? So can they talk about the values of the organization, product safety in case of process failure, and being able to speak a little more sophistication around if this critical control point fails or if this control measure fails, what happens to the product? What are they involved in? Who do they communicate that to? And their level of knowledge of what happens to the product post their spot in the process line where the issue may occur. Are they aware of customer requirements? Do they know the regulatory requirements that the facility must meet? And the auditors and in internal auditing, observing employees in the operation. What are their behaviors? In management of corrective actions, this is a great place to show commitment, food safety culture, your motivations to improve, your behaviors. Is root cause analysis rigorous? Is there a strong team that looks at failures, looks at outcomes from those failures? Is there a methodology for root cause analysis that you're committed to, that you're successfully using or fully utilizing? In my previous audit experience, I've seen sites with great root cause analysis tools, but then when you start to discuss the outcomes of those tools and application of those tools, some of the feedback is, well, we do those, but we don't really do anything with the information we get from that afterwards. So fully engaging those tools, documenting the effectiveness of the outcome of the use of those tools, where appropriate, keeping the food safety team as participants in the decision-making process of outcomes of corrective actions, because these may not be all directly HACCP related, could be other supportive prerequisite program related issues. Having appropriate time frames for closure, so not having non-conformances kind of hanging out there and not closed and not acted on. And then trending of non-conformances and bringing that trend to management review and making sure there's an outcome from management review around any recognized trends you may see. So that's a great place to show your culture. Even if you're not, maybe generation 4 on the culture scale, these are great places to show where you're starting. For employee interviews, as you begin that preparation for the audit, know your strengths and weaknesses of the employees on each shift. Have you defined and established or communicated your values and mission to them adequately enough so they can talk about it? How do they show that when they're working? How do they live it? How do they contribute to the values of the organization? And can they describe how management supports? So back to that concept of food safety culture, improvement, and sustainability comes from the top down and the bottom up. So the auditors will interview senior management. How do you support the consistent expectation of food safety practices? And then how do the employees support that? And there should be a consistent message from both sides of that. Training should be organization-driven training. There should be training around the motivation to act. Are they authorized to act on food safety? We know that training is fantastic, but it's not enough to support that result that you want of behavior change. So when we train, the science and the data tell us that trainees forget close to 80% of the detail of the training, so they need refresher. They need those reminders, those pre-shift handoff meetings where they're reinforcing food safety behaviors. If there are changed habits, recognizing that. If a particular line in the facility has been working on a behavior change, recognize that. And then looking at the root causes of mistakes, and that goes back to the non-conformance, having a solid process there. And then training with the customer in mind. Do the employees know what that customer is looking for in their product, if it relates to their work area? Giving them that information. So to move forward, to wrap up what we've been talking about, and again, a guidance to move forward, look at the opportunity of having food safety guided by a food safety culture team, or integrate some of those activities into your HACCP team so that you can demonstrate and build culture into your food safety management system. Make sure that there's a movement in management review to talk about culture. Approach personal safety culture and food safety culture together. If you're conducting an internal audit and you're internally auditing maybe the maintenance manager, and you know they have some metrics around safety for personal safety, is there a way to integrate food safety matrix with them? Sanitation after maintenance, line clearance after maintenance. Set some goals, measure yourself for improvement and celebrate the improvement. Encourage honest feedback and answers from when you're engaging with some of those measurement tools, if you choose to, thinking about values, behaviors, and commitment levels. So I know we'll be opening up for questions, and I really appreciate your time and attention today. If my contact information is there, and also Patrick Pimentel, who's our Technical Services Director in the U.S. and for food safety consulting, and has some fantastic information on the NSF maturity model. If you're interested in engaging with that, he would be your contact there, or you can contact me. And again, thank you for your time this morning. It's exciting to talk about this. It's up and coming, and something that is going to be permeating our food safety management systems in the future.
Okay, Kim, fantastic. Thanks. If you can stop sharing your slides now, and then we'll come on webcam and do the Q&A. Brilliant. Some top tips there that people can peruse, and perhaps re-watch the webinar, look at the slides, and also, as you say, contact you. Just to explain again this this model that you've got available. Do you want to just explain again what this model is?
Yes, the NSF. Oh, sorry, I misunderstood your question.
Sorry,
we will have a white paper connected to that we will work out between us the link so you can provide that, how we want to provide that. But it's really a look at the entire organization. And there are actually 9 pillars underneath what we talked about that will address business goals, that address training, that address attitudes, behaviors, those motivations towards that, and how to establish clear objectives around the business, but also around culture, so that the focus is not constantly with the numbers, where the employees get the message that culture is as important as the numbers, the business numbers.
Okie dokie. Brilliant. Okay, and like I say, we'll try and put that in the follow-up email that we send out. Okay, some questions then. A good one to start with. Patricia, what would you recommend? A small plant, 8 employees, 3 office personnel. How would you develop a culture beyond the Generation 2-3 level?
Right. I think it takes, that's a great question. Because if you're a small facility, there's not a lot of resource time. But become educated, learn about food safety culture, engage with some of the tools get some minimum measurement, and in a small group like that, starting to pick some objectives that focus on food safety and culture probably would be very organic and be still very effective. Ground yourself in the food safety team and see where you can grow from there.
Yeah, I guess also in a small company, in some ways, although the resources are a challenge, obviously the level, it's not very bureaucratic. It's a small team, and if there's a good leader, a knowledgeable leader, or you can really affect culture in a positive way and shape it yourselves.
Right.
Okay.
Find get senior leaderships. You need that commitment, but they need that knowledge too. What am I committing to?
Yeah. Okay. Slightly off topic, but you might be able to give some tips. Shazad, how can we execute an effective internal audit program?
How can you execute an effective internal audit program? Train your internal auditors. Make sure they understand the goal of the internal audit. Create or ensure the independence where you can. That's sometimes difficult with small sites. Whenever you audit your own work, you're usually not as hard on yourself as someone independent of you might be. But successful internal audit programs are led by committed teams that are well trained, that have knowledge of the organization, that are trained in internal audit skills or auditor skills.
Okay. Diane, should all audits be unannounced?
Obviously, that's the goal. That's the direction. That appears to be the direction we're heading in. That's with SQF identifying their select sites. If you choose to have an unannounced audit every time, the GFSI benchmark document is requiring unannounced audits. It depends on the organization. If you have a strong food safety management system, I would contend that you could endure an unannounced audit each time, and it would probably go better than you think. And sites that have been hesitant about going through an unannounced audit have found that it goes as well as their announced audit. And it wasn't as scary as they thought. But certainly government agencies are, that's been some of the feedback of these audits need to be unannounced because they prepare, sites prepare.
Yeah. And you should be 24/7, 365 days a year.
That's right. Audit ready all the time.
Yeah. Okay. Suman, how an illiterate employee can be assessed on food safety culture understanding? How can you assess somebody with that's illiterate or maybe language barriers? Or
right. Observation would be one. I think that is a legitimate challenge if the assessment is of attitudes and behaviors is in a written format. But through observation, through their engagement in the process, you might be able to start there. That is a particular challenge.
Okay. Michael, nice goatee, Simon. Oh. Or maybe I've been a little bit lazy and not had a shave. Yeah, okay. Right. Juan, include the food safety goals into the business priorities is a good strategy for improving food safety culture. It's marked it as a question. I think you'd agree with that, would you, Kim?
Yes. Wherever you can integrate that, do that. That's ultimately the goal, that the measures to management around food safety are just as important as those other measures to the business. And I realize the other measures keep the doors open. I fully respect that.
Okay.
But that final level of integration.
Right. Lady Bayon, my company wants to be certified by SQF, but it's been hard to involve top management in food safety culture and training. How can I approach it if there is no management review implemented?
it will be hard to become certified if management review is not in place, because it's a key piece of SQF. I think the education on why SQF is a value proposition, why it's a benefit, I would start there. And there is information, if you go to the SQF website and look around, or shoot an email to folks within SQF off that website, they will give you information on the value proposition, the fact that, recalls are decreased in sites that are certified, that efficiencies are gained, that you find your food safety problems in-house when you put a system like that in place.
So you can try to sell it to them. You shouldn't have to, but with some positive benefits, but also negative stories like the Peanut Corporation of America.
In the United States, this is an easy sell because those people are in prison, including the QA manager. So, things that we never thought would happen. The environment that we manufacture food in is not the same as it was.
Dan, what are some common metrics used to measure food safety culture development?
Yeah, engagement would be one. And really, the metrics that you will identify will come from engaging with those measurement tools. So looking at the organization, it may be something very small. Success and HACCP, you'd have to engage with a tool.
Okay, just a little compliment for you, because I've had one about my goatee. Best presentation to date, thank you, Henry Bouchat. And that's 91 webinars, so that's a good feedback there.
Nice, thank you.
Chizoba, what is the best way to incubate? I quite like that. Oh, no. Well, no, incubate food safety culture in employees where there's been multiple failed attempts to get them on track in this area.
I'm making an assumption that with senior management, things just haven't gotten off the ground, or I guess I'll answer that in two ways. Oh, sorry about that. I guess you'd have to re-engage senior management and make sure they're communicating that from the top down. But I would say that potentially in that position, there is some fatigue around the conversation around food safety culture. So
here we go again.
Yeah. This is just another program that management wants. Again, it's sometimes looking at the numbers. Look at the numbers of failures and what has that cost? What have food safety failures cost the organization? And involving the employees on the floor. Now it's our turn to improve.
Yeah.
Let's drive it ourselves. I think that's very tough.
A lot of comments in the sidebar relate to the same thing, failed attempts, senior management not on board, yada yada, and it's almost like an alcoholic until they stand up and admit they've got a problem or they want to go down this road. It's going to be very difficult. I mean, what can you do from a middle management? You can just do your best, I guess.
I think I agree. But that leadership on the floor, the walking the talk of middle management, that gets noticed. Now, it usually gets you noticed and you get more work because you're competent and they're pleased with how you're doing. So more gets put on your shoulders. But I think they're the glue that holds the movement together, middle management. How do they recognize solid behaviors or food safety positive behaviors in employees and turning from a blame culture to an encouraging culture? And mid-level managers are so important with that.
Yeah.
But eventually we're all going to have to put some numbers, and these tools, the measurement tools, help you do that. You have to put some numbers to poor food safety culture as opposed to a strong food safety culture. And the numbers speak management's language. And that's helpful.
Yeah. Suman, what kind of rewards would you even recommend reward system for good food safety culture?
Right. I don't think the intent of that is to go into a financial, realm where people are getting financial rewards. Most of the science says that peer recognition is a huge motivator. So recognizing at shift handoff meetings, I don't know if some of the senior leadership at your plants has some type of quarterly town hall where they're recognizing success or recognizing folks for improvements they've suggested or near misses for food safety that they've identified.
Okay, lots of comments. Quite a long one here. I mean, are you familiar with the BRC's Culture Excellence Model?
Somewhat. I don't know it
right
backwards and frontwards. So if it's specific about the BRC culture model, probably best approached with them. But it's excellent, and it goes very much deeper than I talked about, like our tool does also. But they go much deeper into connecting behaviors and financial. I think it's excellent.
Okay.
It's very good.
Right. Any more questions? We've got 3 minutes to go. So while we've still got Kim, any more questions? Lots of thank yous. VEDPAL, can a food safety and a food defence audit be done simultaneously? I mean, GFSI standards cover an element of food defence.
Yeah. I think that the integration of management system elements can be done together. If you're talking to a receiver about food safety, you can certainly talk to them at the same time about their role in the food defense plan.
Yeah.
So there are similarities that and efficiencies you'd want to gain.
Okay, I think we've exhausted the questions. So what we'll do is we'll follow up with an email. We'll put the recording, the slides, and also the link that you mentioned to your model.
Yeah, I will do that work on my side.
Yeah, and they'll also see in there that there are other reference models out there. Mm-hmm. But as you said, it's not going away. Quite rightly, it's not going away. Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. Right then, Kim, thanks very much for your input today.
Thank you so much to everyone. Great. Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for a great webinar. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, ladies and gents, one more thing to do is to issue your certificate, which I will do now in the sidebar. Just click on that. It's a PNG image. Download it, print it, and sign your name yourself, or open it in Paint, an image editing package, and type your name, and then there you go. So another great session. We'll be back on 16th of March for passing your compressed air analysis, tips and troubleshooting for successful compliance with Matthew DeVay, Quality Assurance Director at our friends Trace Analytics. Thanks for your attendance today. I'll decide, maybe I'll have a poll whether to have a shave or grow this goatee a bit more. Thanks for your attendance. Enjoy the rest of your day. Happy Friday and have a great weekend, and we'll see you soon. Take care. Thanks. Bye.